My name's Michelle Hassinger. I am the Global Marketing Manager that has the privilege of working for ExxonMobil, but exclusively with General Motors, which includes motorsports, Corvette racing, Cadillac racing, all things motorsports with General Motors and Mobil 1 as well. I'm going to let Adam introduce himself in just a moment. I'm going to cover just a couple logistics things because today's flow for our Mobil 1 Tech Talk is a little bit different than normal. When you walked in, you should have received a raffle ticket. We'll make sure you have one of those. That is for the very end. So at the very end, we will be, as always, giving away, or raffling off, a few of our Corvette Mobil 1 jackets. If you don't win them, they are available for sale in the store. We will also be raffling off a couple of the hot laps at the MCM Motorsport Park. So that will be at the very end, so we want to make sure everyone has a ticket. Another opportunity is we will be distributing hats to folks that in advance asked questions. All of you should have received an email from the National Corvette Museum if you were registered for this event. And it was a few weeks ago, and it was the opportunity to submit questions in advance. We thought we'd get a few. We got almost 50. So most of today we are going to spend answering the questions you submitted. But in addition to that, we're going to play a game today, a Kahoot game where you have the opportunity to answer some of the most common questions in a game format. And the winner of that will also win a jacket. We can go ahead and move to the next slide. Before I hand it over to Adam to introduce himself and before we play the game, wanted to just talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing with General Motors and Corvette. We are very proud to have been a partner with Corvette since day one of Corvette racing, factory fill in the Corvette back to 1993. Some of the things that we have been working on just over, since the last bash, really since anniversary. I'm going to start with Fantasy Camp, the Pratt Miller Fantasy Camp, driven by Mobil 1 that takes place at the National Corvette Museum Motorsport Park. That last year was the first year ever. It was sold out. This year that's going to take place on October 28th. It has sold out, but there is a wait list, and as soon as they have 12 people on the wait list, they're adding another day. So please go to the Motorsport Park website and click to, if you're interested in Fantasy Camp, it's basically a day in the life of what a driver experiences working with the Pratt Miller racing team. So something that we've been supporting since that started last year. Some other examples of how we work with GM, you've got working with GM to bring the ZR1 out to an event that took place in Big Sky, Montana. It was an ice race. We film a lot of content together with them. That content was used in Road and Track magazine the following week in a story about some of the GM leadership driving the ZR1. You see that we're also using some of this in China, where we work with General Motors because we are a global partner of theirs. The special livery we did on the Pratt Miller Corvette racing team cars for Sebring, the Mobil 1 12 Hours of Sebring. We've now done a special livery for 3 years in a row, and that's kind of a fan favorite. We're featuring Corvettes in our advertising campaign around the introduction of our new classic car for older cars. We also work with all of the Corvette race teams beyond Pratt Miller. So one of the things mentioned last night at the dinner is that the princes of Malaysia have a Corvette race team. And so whether it's Malaysia, the newest one is K-Tunes in Japan. We're working with those race teams to support them with product, to make sure that those cars are all running on the recommended Mobil 1 product, but also in many other ways from a brand sponsorship as well. I'm going to highlight one other thing that you should have in your hands. Adam will mention this as well. All of you have a wallet card. It is a QR code, and that is going to take you to our technical help desk. If your questions aren't covered today and we don't get to them, at any time you can call Monday through Friday, or you can email and submit a form, and any questions you have, doesn't necessarily have to be about Mobil 1 motor oil for your Corvette. Any questions you have on fluids for any vehicle, you can get answered if you want to be in direct contact with one of our engineering team. So wanted to make sure you had that so that you can keep it with you. You don't have to come to a tech talk to be able to engage with our support team. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Adam to introduce himself, and then we'll move to the Kahoot game.
Thanks, Michelle. Good morning, everybody. My name is Adam Meyer. I'm our U.S. Motorsports Technology Advisor. What that means is I work with race teams throughout North America to provide fluid support, engineering support, and develop new formulations for NASCAR, sports car, including Corvette racing, IndyCar, and HRA. Before that, I formulated some of our Mobil 1 products for the first 5 years of my career, including 5W50 Supercar. So very familiar with the products that you're using in your vehicles, and very happy to help the Corvette race team bring those products to the track each weekend to compete and win races. So when we get to the Q&A, we'll go over some things, just general oil questions, some specific Corvette oil questions, and there are even a few really good oil technology questions that I'll touch on for you.
Thanks, Adam. All right, I mentioned we're going to play a game. We're going to move to a Kahoot game, and the first thing we need to do is have everyone scan this QR code and join the game. You're going to actually answer the questions on the game. The opportunity to win is based on two things. It's based on number of correct answers, but it is also based on the speed with which you answer. All right, so you can see that we've got folks joining. We'll give it just another minute here. If you don't have a phone that'll allow you to scan a QR code, play along with your neighbor. These are going to be some of the most common Mobil 1 Tech Talk questions that we get. Also some fun facts around Mobil 1 Corvette trivia before we move to all of the questions that you submitted that Adam is going to help answer today. All right, we're doing pretty well so far. Again, opportunity to win a jacket. Second and third place will get the hats. All right, why don't we kick off the game? All right, first question, you're going to see some multiple choice answers in just a moment. How many different plants has the Corvette been manufactured with Mobil 1 as the factory fill? You'll have 20 seconds to answer each of these questions. You can see the countdown. All right, the correct answer is 1, Bowling Green. Mobil 1 became factory fill of the Corvette after the Corvette began being manufactured at Bowling Green. Go ahead and move to the next question. Oh, it's going to give us a leaderboard in between. So the fastest, we've got probably a lot of right answers there, but the fastest was Roxanne Vett. All right, next question. Again, you'll see the answers appear in just a moment. What year did Mobil 1 become factory fill? I said it earlier. We also celebrated an anniversary a few years ago. I'm not going to say which one. 4 seconds left. It was 1993, so 39 folks got the correct answer. Right, Glenn, you've overtaken fastest and correct answer. All right, technical question here. What does the 5 in 5W40 stand for? So 10 seconds here. All right, correct answer is how easily the oil flows when cold. Over half of you, 45, got the right answer. Let's see what that does with our leaderboard. All right, Scott has jumped to the top. Next question. Got a true or false here. Even if you don't accumulate a lot of miles on your vehicle, you should change your oil once per year. True or false? 10 seconds left. I know that we got a lot of questions, many of them from you guys, around low mileage Corvettes and storing Corvettes and changing the oil, and Adam's going to talk about that. The answer is true, once per year. Almost everyone in the room. So next we'll do the leaderboard. All right, Scott stayed at the top. All right, question about storing. If you store your vehicle seasonally, changing your oil before putting your vehicle in storage is the best option. True or false? Changing before you put your vehicle into storage. All right, not as many as previous, but the 60 people in the room knew that that is also true. Roxanne has jumped back up to the top. What does the W in 0W40 stand for? Wait, wear, winter, or winner? See the bottle of Mobil 1 Supercar 0W40 there, recommended. All right. It is winter. It is winter. Wait is commonly thought of as what it is, but it is winter. The W stands for winter. Yeah, most selected wait. The answer was actually winter. The shelf life of a sealed Mobil 1 motor oil bottle sitting in your garage. So it's sealed, it's in your garage. What's the shelf life? 7, 5, 3, or 1 year. Never been opened. It's been in your garage a while. What's the shelf life? 5 years is the correct answer. All right, we've got Bob M. at the top now. All right, which Corvette models dating back to 1993 do not take Mobil 1 Supercar, both for street and track use? This is a little harder one. There is an exception with one model. It is the 7th generation Corvette ZR1. That one vehicle, when tracking, it's 15W40, right? 15W50. So Mobil 1 15W50 when tracking that car. It is the only exception to Mobil 1 Supercar 0W40 for both street and track on all models going back to 1993. All right, Bob has stayed at the top. He's got a little bit of a lead too. Why are multi-grade engines like 5W30 used for engines? Some of these are more obvious than others. Everyone got this one right. They perform differently at cold and hot temperatures. So Bob has stayed at the top. Remember, you can catch up by being faster. All right. In what year did Mobil 1 become commercially introduced in the US? If you think back, this was another anniversary that was celebrated in the past so many years. So what year was Mobil 1 Synthetic commercially introduced? Prior to commercial introduction, we were actually working with NASA, and it was used for the space shuttle. So the correct answer is 1974. We celebrated our 50th anniversary 2 years ago. All right, so Bob has stayed at the top, but we've got some others. Tyler's moving up. What was the original formulation of Mobil 1 Supercar called? So if you guys remember Cam, as Cam was leaving to go run his winery, Ghost Hill Winery, a few years ago, we with a lot of your feedback, the previous name was really confusing. And so we renamed this oil Mobil 1 Supercar, really in recognition of the Corvette. Mobil 1 ESP Formula 0W40. And if you still have some of that in your garage and it's less than 5 years old and it's sealed, you could still use it. And you may still find this on websites because some of the retailers have not actually updated the name. Mobil 1 ESP Formula 040 is the old name for Supercar. Ooh, Tyler's still moving up, as is Hedge. Okay, next. What does the 40 in 0W40 stand for? So we talked about the W being winter and the 0 before the winter being the cold start temperature. What is the 40? The oil's viscosity at the high temperature. So you've got the cold temperature on the left, you've got the high temperatures at the right. Next. All right, Bob stayed at the top. Tyler's still second. Roxanne, you're keeping in the top 3. Next question. All right, so this is, the previous question was when it's sealed in your garage, once it's opened and that foil seal is punctured, what's the shelf life then? The answer was 5 years when it was sealed and unopened. How does the impact of the shelf life once it's opened? All right, it's 1 year. Most of you got that correct answer. Next question. All right, Bob has stayed, but now we have Mike and Casey. Ooh, lots of folks moving up. All right, Mobil 1 Supercar 040 is designed to maintain performance under what conditions? The faster you answer, the quicker you can move up in this leaderboard. A few seconds left here. There are no incorrect answers. So all of those answers were correct. You've got the high temperature, situations requiring maximum engine protection, rapid temperature fluctuations. Next. All right, Tyler's coming up on you, Bob. What is the benefit of Mobil 1 advanced synthetic technology in Corvette applications? This is where the speed can get you, because you got to read through all the answers, but you also want to be really fast. All right, 68 folks with the right answer, all of the above. Next. Bob has stayed at the top. All right, which type of driving is Mobil 1 Supercar motor oil most suitable for? 20 seconds to answer this question. Best for older engines, cold weather city commuting, only highway cruising, everyday driving, and high performance track events. All right, 67 of you with the correct answer. It is both street and track. We gave some hints on that before. Next. All right, we've got 4 more questions. We are known for being the first what in the automotive industry? Mobil 1 was the first what globally? Few seconds left. Almost everyone got this right. We were the first globally available full synthetic motor oil. Back to 1974. All right, when you start your car on a cold morning, what % of engine wear can occur? Trickier question here, so this could change the leaderboard a bit. What % of engine wear can occur when you're cold starting your vehicle? All right, the correct answer is 70. So let's see how if that has changed the leaderboard or if Bob has stayed at the top. Bob stayed at the top, but Tyler, you are like right behind him. All right, next. Just a few questions left to change up that leaderboard. Mobil 1 Supercar 0W40 holds what important industry approval distinction? It was the first or only what? Couple possible answers here. First or only what? Correct answer is the first ever Dexos R approved engine oil with that Dexos R standard from GM. And Adam's going to talk a little bit about what those Dexos specs mean because we got some good questions on that. Next. All right, Bob stayed in the lead, but wow, we've got just a couple questions here. Are there two left or one? All right, we've got two questions left. How many generations of Corvette racing factory team cars have used Mobil 1? 1, 2, 3, or 4? This just requires maybe a little knowledge of Corvette racing teams and how many generations there have been. I see some fingers up with the right answer. It is 4. We have been in the Corvette race car since day one, all of the generations of the factory team car. So we have the last question. Bob remains in the lead, but Tyler, if you're just a little faster with the right answer, Roxanne, maybe you're in third place. Last question. This is a tough one to end with. What are the 3 primary, so you got to select 3 answers here. What are the 3 primary wear metals that are monitored and used in oil analysis reporting? We saved a really hard question to see if we could mix up that leaderboard at the end. When the last few times Cliff has been here, he's talked about used oil analysis and he's talked about these wear metals. Definitely a more technical question to distinguish our leaderboard. All right, so you're going to see the 3 right answers appear. It is aluminum, copper, and iron. And let's see if that changed up our leaderboard. Bill K is in 3rd place. That's a hat for you, Bill. Tyler ended up in 2nd place. A hat for Tyler. And Bob, where's Bob? All right, Bob in the back. We've got a jacket for you. We've got a gift card, and you'll be able to order the jacket in your own size. So thank you for playing. The rest of the time, because we really wanted to get to, as I mentioned, we solicited questions in advance, wanted to see how many questions we could get so that we really worked through. We never get to all of your questions. We received almost 50. So I still don't know that we can get to every question, but our mobile technical help desk will be responding. And again, you have the QR code and the wallet card if we don't get to your questions. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Adam. We're going to run through as many questions as we can for the rest of the session. If your name appears, because we've got all the questions and who submitted them, raise your hand or come up to us after. We're going to make sure you get a hat. So we shouldn't have to run a mic around because we're going to be taking the questions on the screen.
If I could have the trivia winners raise their hands for me, please.
Yes, so the first, second, and third. We needed Tyler and Bill for the hats. All right, congratulations, Tyler. So a hat to Tyler. Bill was in the back. Hat to Bill. And then where was our winner? Right now. Oh, you guys might have been looking at each other's right next to each other.
Bill.
All right, Adam, over to you for the questions.
Right. Thanks, Michelle, for running that game. After that, I think some of you might even be able to answer your own questions that you submitted. And some of the questions had sort of a similar theme to them, so it seems like you get a really quick answer to your question. Don't tune out right away. Pay attention to the next couple questions because we'll build on some of that information that we talked about. So there will be some that are review for you at this point, and then we'll get into some details of why on some of those questions. So the first question was...
And if you're in the room as the questions appear... Oh, we don't have the clicker. Should we have the clicker?
You're good.
Or we'll just let the back of the group. You did such an amazing job with the Kahoot game. We may just let you. All right, so Adam's got a clicker now. Is Carl in the room? All right. Carl, you're the first question we're taking. Oh, no, not Carl. Okay. Go ahead, Adam.
So this question about when you go to store your car, when is the best time for an oil change? And as we learned from the game, it's right before you put your car away for the winter. The reason why is because if you've driven it over the summer, you have some fuel, some water, some combustion byproducts that have made it into the oil, and you don't want to let those sit in your engine for 5, 6, 7 months during the cold winter. You want to put the car away with a fresh, clean oil charge in it. Start it up in the spring, it's ready to go. Can you still hear me? Okay. The next question was about oil change being recommended yearly, even if you put a low number of miles on your car, and then how to dispose of low mileage oil. So used oil should always be recycled. A lot of your local auto parts stores and mechanics will help you recycle your used oil. But if you don't change your oil at least once a year, you can start to get the formation of sludge and deposits just from having that oil exposed to air. So think about it as tied to the product shelf life recommendations. When it's sealed, 5 years, no problem. But once it's open, you've exposed it to oxygen, you get a little bit of moisture from the air, you get the temperature cycles that it's going to experience, you can start to break down the oil chemically. So whether it's sitting in your engine or in the bottle, that's really where that 1 year recommendation comes from, independent of mileage.
If you see your name pop up, so like we had 2 people ask this break-in oil question, John or David, if you're in the room, just throw your hand up and we'll make sure you get your hat.
Yeah. 2 questions about break-in oil, and I'm going to give you 2 different answers. So if your owner's manual does call for a break-in oil change after 500 or 1,000 miles, definitely good to follow that. If it doesn't, it means that the engineering team has done a lot of work to validate that that's no longer necessary. Now that that's the official answer, what I'll tell you is you have a marvelous piece of engineering with your Corvette. Every new car that I get or I'd recommend anybody to do, I would still do a break-in oil change. It's very low-cost insurance for such a significant investment, so there's nothing wrong with doing a break-in oil change after 500,000 miles. If it makes you more comfortable, please continue to do it. If your owner's manual calls for it, definitely do it. But if you're not in the mood to and your owner's manual doesn't demand it, it is no longer required for certain vehicles. Outside the Corvette, but still in the GM family, low mileage Camaro, when do you base your oil change off of? Number of miles or months since last oil change, and it is, in that case, going to be a very low mileage, so you come up against that 12-month recommendation. So if it's a seasonal drive, right before you put it away for the winter, otherwise just change it that same month every year, maybe when you have one of your other vehicles serviced.
Is Carolyn in the room? Didn't see it. Oh, in the front? Great.
So a low mileage Corvette, about 200 miles a year. How often should you change the oil? I think everybody here knows the answer to that question now. But how often do you change the filter? And do things break down if they're not circulated regularly? We'll start with the last part of that question. It is just good for your vehicle, for the seals, for your oil system, to circulate the oil every few months. Instead of letting it sit off for 11 months a year and putting all 200 miles on in just one nice trip in the summer, letting your car start and idle for a little while every few months is definitely not a bad idea. Changing the filter every time you change the oil is still recommended. So as that oil ages just in ambient conditions, anything that's in the filter that's making it out into the oil, or anything that's breaking down in the oil that's starting to plug the filter, you need to change the filter at the same time you do the oil change. So no more often than once a year, but regardless of mileage, make sure you schedule that annually.
Is Gary in the room? How about George?
All right, now we're putting a little more miles on the car. The recommended number for Supercar 0W40 is 7,500 miles for Corvettes. But a lot of our other products, you see us claim much higher oil drains, 10,000, 12,000 here. I think we have products that are up to 20,000 mile oil drain with our extended performance line. However, for Corvettes or for other high-performance vehicles, we typically do the validation testing, pushing performance, not oil drain interval. So this means we have worked with GM to confirm oil drain intervals out to 7,500 miles. We're not eager to push really high mileage oil drains for this type of application. So there isn't a benefit, if you will, to trying to get a 20,000 mile Corvette oil drain, because you want to be changing the oil more frequently and really having that fresh oil type performance every mile you put on your engine. Okay, another question from Nick about oil life monitors. So historically, oil life monitors or even just the dashboard oil change indicators sometimes used to just be mileage or time based. In modern vehicles, oil life monitors take into account driving conditions, idle time, how many miles you put on the car, time since last oil change, and are a very good indicator of when you should change your oil. So that being said, it's not the only thing I would trust, but I would never ignore it. Combine this with what we've talked about so far with a 12-month oil drain. If your oil life monitor comes on before that 12 months, it's time to change your oil. If you make it to 1 year, even if your oil life monitor hasn't come on, it is a good idea to go for an oil change at that time. Okay, let's go back in time a little bit. So C2s and C3s, these older Corvettes, this is pre that 1993 that Michelle had in the game. What are the best Mobil products for those cars? So we have Mobil 1 15W50 for older Corvettes, older in this case being C2, C3. We also have a new product available called Mobil 1 Classic Car, and it's a 10W30 right now. That can also be a good fit for some older engines. 1962 Corvette. What is the best Mobil 1 engine oil to use in this older engine? So this still fits in that same range of having 15W50 as a recommendation. And I think we're going to get to why in a later question. Yeah, I think this is the last 80s and before question. So an 81 Corvette, it's hard to find conventional oil. Which Mobil 1 synthetic oil should you use and why? This is the third time you're going to hear Mobil 1 15W50. The reason is for those older engine architectures, you need additional zinc to protect the valve train. So valve train design changed in the 1980s, and oil design requirements changed with it. But for older engines, you want that higher zinc product that 15W50 offers. Okay, a C4 with an LT5 engine, had Mobil 1 as the factory fill. What is the best current Mobil 1 oil for this engine? If you're paying attention during the game, everything from 1993 forward has been tested to be backwards compatible with Mobil 1 Supercar. So Mobil 1 Supercar 040 is our current recommendation for this engine. I think the original factory fill was a 5W30, and then a different oil if you wanted to run it on the track. And in order to simplify things for the consumer, we worked with GM to develop 0W40 Supercar and then test it on every generation of engine back to 1993 to make sure that it was suitable for everything LT5 and newer up until we introduced the 550 for a few products. One of those would be a 2024 Z06 that sees the track sometimes a year. What about the 5W50 makes it suitable for both street and track use? So one of the reasons when we had the two product recommendation for street and track is we had a lower viscosity, lower zinc product for the street, higher viscosity with more zinc in it for the track. And that more zinc was supposed to give you more valve train protection. But what it also brings with it is phosphorus, which can damage catalytic converters, can affect your emissions, your fuel economy, things like that. So when we designed the 5W50, we worked with GM to design a solution that had the right amount of zinc to give you protection, even out on the track, but was below the current industry limit for phosphorus for catalytic converter protection. So we've designed it to be in that sweet spot where you can have one product instead of two. And then the viscosity grade itself was chosen with GM engineering to give you bearing protection, even under high speed and high load conditions you'd see on the track, while still being efficient for the road. All right, now we get into some of the fun questions. I'm a chemist and not an engineer, so some of these I could talk for a long time about. Stop me if I go a little too long. So in synthetic oils, what makes an oil synthetic, and are there different levels of synthetics? Synthetic, conventional, and then you may have also seen synthetic blend are marketing terms that are trying to describe what's in the oil. But what makes an oil synthetic is that you're actually making or breaking bonds, doing chemistry on the composition of the oil. So there are 5 different base stock groups for oil. The first 2 would be considered conventional. The next 3 would be considered synthetic. But what they all have in common is you are not making that product just by distillation, by separating it from something else. You're actually making it by doing, whether that's polymerization or hydroprocessing, making molecules that weren't in that mixture to begin with. And that's what makes something a synthetic oil. So what's the difference between Mobil 1, that's recommended for all your Corvettes, and other synthetic engine oils that you could use in place of Mobil 1 products? And the difference is really the amount of testing that we do on your specific engines. So this is both Dexos R specification testing that we'll touch on later, testing during development of the engine. They have to put engine oil in it when they're doing development of all of the parts and things. So it's lots of development data on that product. And then it's performance on the track as the racing teams use those same products. So we have experience in the broadest range of operating conditions and the most hours and revs with Mobil 1 and Corvette engines compared to other synthetics that might be the same viscosity grade.
Was Bill in the room? Didn't see a hand go up. Up? Okay, perfect. Gotcha.
Okay, purchase Mobil 1 supercar for C8 Corvette. A lot of other people in your Corvette club are using Mobil 1, but maybe a different product name. What should you use and why? Also, what are dealers using for oil changes? So dealers should be using Mobil 1 supercar. If you're bringing your Corvette to the dealer, it should be getting Mobil 1 supercar, unless you're still taking 1980s and before Corvette to the dealership. Then 15W50 would be the answer, but you're probably doing those oil changes yourself or with a private mechanic. The choice to use a different Mobil 1 product might come from historical familiarity. Like I said, for a while, 5W30 was recommended, like in the 90s and early 2000s. But because of all of the testing with Supercar 0W40 to be backwards compatible to 1993, that's what you should be using, and that's what dealerships are all encouraged to use as well. An opinion question, okay. Growing opinion that lower viscosity oils being recommended by manufacturers, such as 0W20s, should be reverted back to higher viscosity oils, like a 5W30 or a 0W40. We'll do the second part of that question as well. But when you are designing an engine, when the engineering team is choosing bearing tolerances and clearance, things like that, oil passage sizes, they're doing that with a certain viscosity range in mind. So going up or down maybe one viscosity grade, like a 0W20 to a 0W30, most engines can tolerate that big sort of change. But if you have an engine that's designed to run with a new low viscosity oil, like a 0W16 or a 0W20, I would not recommend trying to go to a 15W50 just to get much more protection. You're changing the fluid dynamics that are happening in that engine too much. You really want to stick to the viscosity range that the engine was designed with. And then does that engine mean turbocharged or having a hybrid system make a difference? So turbochargers changed oil formulations drastically about 10 years ago. But current industry specifications, along with OEM specifications like GM has, include tests for turbocharger deposits and low-speed pre-ignition, which can be induced by turbochargers. So most oils on the shelf with any modern certification are formulated to provide protection despite having a turbocharger. Another type of vehicle evolution that we're seeing is hybrids. So hybrids are also changing how engine oils are formulated. When you have a hybrid, you might have an extended amount of time that the engine is off, and then the engine will quickly turn on and the oil is expected to flow. So that's where you see a lot of 0W oils being applied. So you get 0W16, 0W20 recommended for hybrid, and that's because you need those low temperature properties and a lot of fluid flow, even if you don't have your engine operating very much while you're driving your hybrid. Will Mobil 1 come out with more classic car formulations, 530, 540, maybe 040? And I know on the prototype side, we've definitely developed some other viscosity grades of classic car. We've worked to understand what we could do in that space, covering a wide range of viscosities. But I don't think we've looked at things like 0W40 for that, because that was not a common viscosity grade needed for older vehicles. So classic car is targeted at older engine architectures. Those were often really old. You're just monograde engine oils, like an SAE 30. Or older vehicles maybe took a 20W50. So I think you'd see more of that type of formulation for a classic car formulation versus a very modern composition like a 0W40. Just two different designs for two different types of engines. So how does the formulation strategy differ between the LT2 and the LT6 and turbo LT7? So one thing that may surprise folks is that the LT6 is actually a little easier on the valve train. So higher revs, things like that. But because of the geometry being a dual overhead cam, you have much less distance travel, much less pressure in the valve train versus the older engine architecture. Imagine spinning a NASCAR engine as fast as you'd spin an LT6. That would be a really high demand thing for the oil. But when you have both engine architectures and you design either the 0W40 or the 5W50 for them, you're choosing additive levels, temperature operating ranges for that very specific set of parts. That's why we work so closely with Corvette to develop these oils. These aren't oils that we had on the shelf and we said, yeah, maybe this is good for Corvette. We're choosing all of the elements of the composition to match the operating conditions that that specific engine's going to see. Similar question, so what factors lead to the Mobil 1 formulation used for the C8? And that is, again, in cooperation with GM Engineering. So they do tons of modeling before they will actually put an engine together. They'll have decided what viscosity range they think they want the oil to be, but the additive chemistry and composition really falls to us to determine. So that can be thousands of formulations that we model and maybe hundreds of formulations that we make in a lab to do a small beaker of oil that we're going to do temperature testing or wear testing on. We'll choose the best features of all of those and combine them into an early development candidate to send for engine development. And as we get feedback about wear and shear and deposits, we can tweak that formulation so that when the car is ready to release, that we have the best product available and released a new product with the 550 supercar that was suitable for that. All right, when formulating an oil, how do you balance demand for fuel economy with long-term engine protection? So a thinner fluid is usually easier to pump. It causes less parasitic loss on the system. You would expect to have higher fuel economy. So, and as the demand for efficiency goes up, you see a shift to lower and lower viscosity oils. A thicker oil that has higher film thickness often is correlated with better engine protection. The comment I'll make here is that Corvettes are performance focused. We're developing the oils for not just cruising on the street, but for track use. And because we have to have a single oil for that, our emphasis is on durability. And that's aligned with someone like the Corvette race team. The endurance racing, being a balance of performance series, they don't capture an extra horsepower if we can capture it with the engine oil. They'll be asked to include more weight or they'll have their power curve changed. But they need durability. They need the engine to last. So our first, second, and third priority when designing for Corvette in particular is durability.
Adam, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second here. If you do not have a red ticket for today's raffle, could you please hold one finger in the air? Keep that in the air until someone brings you a ticket. Thank you.
We'll do a couple more questions while we finish passing out tickets. I see the big timer in back telling me I'm out of time. But would changing from 5W40 to 0W40 harm the C7 engine? In fact, I'd say the opposite. So we do not have a 5W40 supercar. So you want to have, well, C7 should be getting, 540 product shouldn't be available for Corvette. So you want to change to a 0W40 so that you're using supercar that has the chemistry that you need.
Why don't you do one more as we make sure everyone in the room has a raffle ticket before we jump to the raffles and close out here?
This is a great question, a racing-related question, so definitely what I get to spend a lot of my day-to-day on. High heat track conditions. What's the biggest factor limiting the oil's performance? And I think the answer is actually it's going to have very little to do with the oil if you have a very high-quality synthetic, but it's all of the components of the oil system. It's the oil coolers, the oil filters. It's making sure that you don't get any damage, you don't have any clogs. If you can regulate the temperature of the oil very well when the vehicle is new, oil performance is not the limiting factor. But if you have a cracked oil cooler or you have a clog somewhere in the system and you start to see extremes in oil temperature, that's when you can start to see engine wear and engine breakdown. So if you're tracking your car a lot, checking all the components of your oil system and not just putting a fresh oil change in would be more important to performance, I would say. It's just not an aspect that people think about. Usually it's always the oil's the part that you change. But that whole system is responsible for the thermal regulation, which helps manage the high heat conditions.
Go ahead and move to the next one. We've still got quite a few hands up waiting for raffle tickets.
All right. Do we recommend any oil additives or conditioners for vehicles that are low mileage? That's a quick answer. No, we don't. The oil additives that we have, we don't test compatibility with aftermarket oil conditioners and top treats and don't recommend using them. We're confident that the detergents and antioxidants and things that we have in the oil will be stable for that 1 year that we recommend. What is a misconception that enthusiasts may have about modern engine oils, especially with synthetics like Mobil 1? The Corvette audience is usually a pretty well-educated audience, so there's not a lot of misconceptions in the group. A broader misconception is on pushing oil drains out longer and longer, like a 20,000-mile oil drain product. We have Mobil 1 extended performance. People, no way oil can go 20,000 miles. I change my oil every 3,000 miles or every 5,000 miles. But we've actually, usually in working with race teams, been able to push the performance of oil so far that when you go to highway driving conditions, you can get tremendously long oil drains that would have seemed inaccessible 10 or 15 years ago. So those products really are tested out to 20 or 25,000 miles, and they really can go that long under normal operating conditions.
Go ahead and take this last one here.
Sounds good. Hear Corvette's firing up. That's always good sound. What's the difference between different GM Dexos specifications? GM has a lot of Dexos specifications out there. Dexos 2 was a specification for a while. Dexos R, which should be the spec for all the oils you're using for Corvette. Dexos 1, which is the gasoline-fueled engine oil spec for most of the rest of the fleet here in the US. Dexos D, which is a diesel-fueled engine oil spec. And the difference is in the type of testing that is done to get that certification. So if it's a Dexos R spec, that's a high-performance spec, so that has additional high-temperature testing. It has additional wear testing. And those are the types of features that are required for an oil that's going in the Corvette. Whereas something like a Dexos D spec for diesel tests compatibility with diesel fuel, tests soot handling, things like that. So it's all about having the right Dexos, the letter or number after the specification for what your vehicle calls for, so making sure that your owner's manual matches. One of the exceptions being is if you have an older Corvette, the old Dexos 2 spec has some of the features of the Dexos R spec, it had some of the features of the Dexos D spec, but they split those two out so that they're both much more suitable for purpose for modern engines. So if you have a older owner's manual that calls for Dexos 2, if it's for a Corvette, what you're looking for now is Dexos R.
All right. right, thank you, Adam. All right, time is upon us. We got to a lot more questions than we normally do, but we still didn't get to all of them. So one, if you asked a question, whether you saw your name appear or not, if you submitted a question, we do have a hat for you. The raffle that we are going to do is for a Corvette jacket and the fast lap. So we're going to do a jacket, then a fast lap, then a jacket, then a fast lap. So there's going to be 4. Go ahead and get your tickets out. I'll have you draw and name them. Just a reminder, as Adam's pulling the first ticket, if we didn't get to a question that you have, Adam will be around after, but you have the wallet card with the QR code that we gave to you. You can scan that. It'll take you to a Google form. There's also a phone number on that card that you can call Monday through Friday, so you can ask your question of any one of our engineering experts at any time.
All right, what are we doing first, jacket or fast lap?
Jacket first.
All right, first ticket for a jacket. The last 4 are 3721.
All right, we have our winner. You're going to get to order a jacket in any size you prefer, and so this is a gift card to allow you to do that. The next one's going to be for one of the fast laps at the Motorsport Park.
Okay. Ticket for a fast lap. The last 4 are 3839.
3839. All right, we've got a winner here. You are going to go right over there, right after the session, and she's going to get your information and sign you up for the fast lap. All right, next for jacket.
Last jacket goes to last 4 of 3806.
All right, back row, I see you. And then the last raffle, Adam, is for another hot lap.
Last ticket is 3827.
3827. Are you in the
Right behind you, Michelle.
All right, perfect. So you are also just lady in the red pants. Just stop by over here. I might be able to trade you for that. You want a jacket? All right, do one more raffle for the fast lap.
All right. Another fast lap. Ticket is 3857.
3857. No, you're for the fast. You get the lap. There you go. So Motorsport Park, fast laps. All right, perfect. So thanks so much for joining us. Again, if we didn't get to your questions, please ask them of our technical help team. And if we missed you on a hat because you did submit a question, please come see us over here.
Thank you, everyone.